and welcome back to Doz's Television Workshop, where today we're going to be doing a deep dive into this thing we featured before. This is the AliExpress HDMI to RF converter. Let's get into it. Right, it's time for a deep dive into this. This is actually the best-selling video I've made. Lots of people look into this because they want to know whether it's any good. A lot of people slag it off a bit unfairly, I think. So let's have a quick recap what it does. You put 5 volts in that socket there, HDMI in that socket there, RF falls out of there, you tune it into your vintage TV set or your retro TV set via the aerial socket, and it gives you a picture. It comes with this little handset that's quite good. Some really good functions on there. I covered most of that in the first episode, so if you're tuning afresh to this, maybe go back and have a look at it. But there are a lot of unanswered questions. This one you can see I have lost the little IR window off there, but being as I'm going to take it apart in a minute, I'm not particularly fussed. The biggest thing you need to do to improve the quality of this unit is get the supplied power supply and yeet it into the sun, because it's junk. Right. Unanswered questions from the first video. I get asked a lot. What does the USB port do? USB port? I have absolutely no idea. It might just be for power. I don't know. It might have a media player in it. Who knows? We'll have a look at that. What does it do? It does PAL in very many sound carrier spacings. So I, certainly, because that's what we use here in the UK, DK, L and something else. Those are listed in the comments of the previous video, so kind of look at that. Somebody did help us out a lot with that. Does NTSC, no CCAM, and no, it's not a DVB-T modulator. It is purely analog. Well, what falls out the aerial socket is purely analog anyway. So what I'd like to do is to see if I can extract analog audio and video from it, because I think that'd be quite useful. I could then, you know, feed that into my 405 line System A standards converter and have just HDMI to UHF and 405 line all in a handy box. I've got a video control rack that's over there in the corner that sort of does all that, sometimes not so successfully, but I've got a Hedgehog standards converter that would work really well with that. Things I like about it, it's got adjustments on it, so you can change the RF level, you can change the position and amplitude of horizontal and vertical, so you can actually make your footage look right on a vintage TV set rather than having it in letterbox. You can put it in sort of 4x3L, I think we used to call it, where it's you lose the sides, these bits there, but you still get me. Lucky people. I think that's part of the zoom functionality, but yeah, I've been really impressed with it. It tends to get grainy depending on what resolution you put into it. It's not a signal level output issue that was mooted by a few people in the comments of the last video. It really isn't that. A few people were quite derogatory about its quality, but I don't think it's that bad. I find it a really useful piece of kit. So I don't know how much these are now. It was about 15 quid, I think, when I bought it ages ago. But no, been very good. Just junk the power supply. It's awful. There we go. Needs 5 volts DC. We'll organise that in a minute. But first of all, I want to get it in bits. Now, one thing I've just noticed, I don't know if you see that, there's some slight indentations in the plastic. Let's have a little zoom in, shall we? Bear with. There we are. Can you see there's some distortions in the plastic? I've only just noticed it in the light, look. One there, look. One there. That sort of suggests to me that there's going to be some screws hidden by feet. Oh, and I'd be right. I've not even had to go break the case apart. They've screwed it rather than sort of gluing it. Love them. Right, take it apart. I'm hoping there's not a chip on board thing, a blob in here. That would really spoil our fun. And the other thing I'm hoping is that whatever ICs are in here, they haven't pulled the old stunt of sanding the numbers off them, because that will really spoil our fun. But we can only wait and find out. That's all 4 screws removed. Ooh, interesting stuff. I'm going to need some form of magnification. So what have we got? Clearly, I'd imagine this 4-pin header here is for programming of firmware, perhaps. This looks to be the RFE section over here. It's next to the aerial socket. That can't just be the HDMI, that little blob there, surely. Flux all over the board, but hey, it was cheap. Just going to fetch the board out, see if there's anything on the underside. There is not. Reasonably made board, I think. It's a bit on the thin side, but hey, keep the cost down. Nicely ground planed and ground planed. Is even that a phrase? Lots of through-hole bits there to tie the grounds together. Oh, it looks reasonable, doesn't it? There's some form of switching power supply over here in the corner, but I think we need to have a little look, see what these ICs are. So in fact, I am actually going to need the bigger magnifying glass, I think, to be able to read that. This one has the stronger lenses. Right, that big chip is an FSC 1979. The small IC, but I tell you what, let's just make a note of this. Right, I'm armed with me remarkable. Other electronic notepads are available. So this big chip was FSC 1979. I reckon that's doing all the hard work. FSC 1979. The little IC by the HDMI port is tiny. Appears to be a CM6165, and the tiny little IC over by the RF bits. Oh, has no markings on it at all. Okay, I think the next thing to do is have a look, see if there's a data sheet available for our FSC 1979.
Later that same evening.
Right, having scoured the internet for a data sheet for our FSC 1979, there isn't one. There's a couple of websites offering to try and source me them, the usual Chinese supply chain people, but no data sheet. Even the link for a data sheet is greyed out. And one site even pulls up some history website. Yeah, so there we are. So yeah, nothing. The CM whatever it is, nothing. That nothing. I think that is a little 8-bit microcontroller, 8-pin microcontroller. Sorry, but I can't be sure. And we still don't know what the RFIC is. So we're a little bit in the dark. I've got the scope set up and running. So my intention is to plug it in, have a look at the picture, and if it's anything like the other HDMI converters, probably using this same chip, when there's no input detected, it just comes up with colour bars, which is going to be useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to power it up from the workshop power supply up there, set to 5 volts. And I'm going to scope some of these lines up to see if we can't find a video signal. So let's do that. Powering on, and we can see we've got a screen there, except for my camera has sunk a bit since I set it up. Let's move that up a bit. There we go. Oh dear. Now you're going to be in the way of the other camera. Why is that moving about? That's no good at all. There we are. How's that? Right, so as you see, we've got colour bars, HDMI, no signal, yeah, 61.25 megahertz. That's not what I'm looking at, by the way. That's UHF. That's channel 34, I think. PAL-I, which is just happens to be the system we use here in the UK. So if I mess about with the mode, you can see we've got various different systems. So that's NTSC. My telly decodes NTSC. Just about. Who knew? PAL-BG, wrong sound. PAL-DK, wrong sound. PAL-I, right sound for the UK. Yeah. So I'm just going to hook the scope up. Let's give it a ground. I choose to use the shield of the HDMI. Now, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's just do that so you can see what I'm attempting to do. That'll do nicely, actually. So I'm most interested in this big fat trace that runs across the top of here, because that's heading in the direction of the modulator. So let me just probe there and see if we see a video signal. We won't see anything on 10 volts probably. Let's get that down. Oh, hello. That does look a bit video signally. Oh gosh, have I guessed right first time? This will make a short video, won't it? So let's get a bit of triggering happening. Oh, where's my trigger menu? Because this scope will in fact attempt to trigger the video. There we are. God, would you look at that? So yeah, there you have it. That there looks to me to be like our colour bars. Oh, this is going to be very useful. Yeah, there we go. Those are colour bars. What I want to do, I want to trigger on, let's trigger on a line. There we go. I'm going to put that in a PAL so we've got some idea. That, folks, is what a colour bar looks like. Yeah, it's certainly in PAL. So we've got our frame, our line sync pulse there. This part here, that little squiggle just by there. Let's get a pointing stick. That little squiggle there is called the colour burst, which sets the chrominance reference oscillator in the set. That is white, and then it comes down to our black level here. This hash on here is actually defining the colours, and then line repeats. And if we actually zoom out to our 625 lines, I made a mess of this. Oh, hang on, sync line number, no, odd field. Sync on the even field, we'll see each field. So in between, so these are sync pulses for the field or frame. Let's call it a field because that's what it is. There are 2 fields per frame, an odd and an even, because we're interlaced. So that's the sync pulse. There are 625 lines, and there's another one. That was a lucky guess, wasn't it? So the other thing that remains to be done, of course, is to find the audio. Let me just turn the volume up on the telly. No, we actually have no audio. There's no tone or anything being generated. So I think we're going to need to go and get an HDMI source. Let's do that. Okay, so I've got an HDMI feed coming in from the workshop laptop. This is currently the display, and we have a bit of music, and that is Joseph Suk Serenade Serenade OP6, whatever that means, not into classical, but there it is. Sounds all right. So that is coming out of the TV set from the laptop via the HDMI. Quick note here, I don't see that on the 4K camera there, but there is a bit of grain to this. I don't seem to vary much if I try and sort of shield it, or maybe it does. Yeah, but it's coming from the converter, because if I change the resolution to anything higher, this is 1080 but 4:3, and it's yeah, it does get, the picture quality does descend. Right, the scope cam is running, so I'm just going to give myself a little bit of, so I know that's still playing, and just poke around here and see if we can see where that audio comes in. Right, there's a capacitor there. I don't believe it. Have I just got that right? I think I have. Incidentally, the audio coming through, I've just proved it by going into the sound settings in Ubuntu. This is actually only picking up the left channel. Something else to be aware of. So obviously, if you've got anything happening on a right-hand channel, it's not going to go to the TV. Unbelievably, I think that's our audio. Just give it a little bit more on the volts per division. It's just my lucky day today, isn't it? So that's our audio. That's our video. Good Lord. Right, there's some component numbering on there. Let's just have a look, see if I can read them. I'm going to go zoom in so you can see. Hi, it's VoiceOver Doz here, and I suspect, like me, you're wondering where the footage has gone from the top camera, and also why the sound is so bad. Well, I must have pushed the button on both the sound recorder and the top camera twice, because I had a lot of sound of me just doing things in the workshop after I finished filming the scene, and video footage to match. Yeah, not ideal. Anyway, thankfully, I've managed to recover this screenshot, and I've carefully annotated it in crayon so you can see exactly where the audio was picked up from. Right, where were we? I've zoomed in too far as usual. Come on, focus, you know you want to. Bingo, look at that. Right, so the points are, the video is on this larger capacitor, just there, and the audio is on that second capacitor there. Oh, it's not a capacitor, it's a resistor, that is R6. And the video goes in on B3 or maybe 8.3. Yeah. Definitely looks like a B or an 8. So that actually gives us some flexibility. If we were taking the video out of there, really we should add a buffer, but I suspect there'll be a large quantity of getting away with that. So yeah, perhaps we should just stick a lead on there, drop the video into the telly, and see if that works. Right, bear with me. Okay, I have just tacked in a lead, a piece of screen lead. You can see the signal leads there, and I've just attached the screen to the screen of the RF shield there. Let me zoom out of it. Oh, that's the wrong way. One day I'll get that right. Okay, so you can just see there, this is the laptop that's generating the picture, and you should be able to see on the TV. Now that's RF. There you go, so that's still working. So if I plug this in to there, yeah, you see we get a dip in brightness, and that's because the video circuit on the TV has an additional 75 ohms impedance, so it's just taken our brightness down a bit. But the good news is, of course, we can change that in our menu. So we can bring that back up to compensate for that, so that's something. So if I push input now, and we move over to AV. There we go. So that's our video signal coming directly from the video line. And yeah, it does want a little bit of tweaking up, doesn't it? Let's just turn the brightness up a bit. There we go. So that's direct AV out. One thing I do notice actually is that slightly noisy picture we're getting on RF has gone. So that does mean that the that sort of shash we're getting is obviously coming from the decoder, because like I mentioned, it changes with the resolution, and getting into RF path somewhere. Maybe it needs a bit more decoupling, but that's great. So we've now got a direct video feed out from there, so we can add that into our system. I need to add another lead in for the audio, and then take that into my Hedgehog System A standards converter for some 4 or 5 line action straight from HDMI. Nice. Right, there's the other question, of course, is the USB stick, and what does that do? So let's get a USB stick with maybe some video files on it and see if it's got some sort of inbuilt media player. Is there enough processing in these 2 little chips? I don't know. I suspect not. But let's have a go at it. Okay, so I have myself a classic mini USB stick. I've loaded on there some music files and quite a few different video files, including those that date back to sort of pre-MP4 kind of era, just to prove the point, just in case this, you know, it's got an old chipset or whatever on it. So let's plug it in. Let's swivel that camera around so we can look at the monitor a bit better again. Yep, okay. Nothing has appeared on the screen. Now what do we got in menu? Same as before. VGA AV makes absolutely no difference at all. Mode, no, that just yeah. So sadly not a media player, because that would have been really useful. Yeah, so I still don't know what the USB is for. Just looking at the actual socket itself, let me power it down for a second. Zooming in. Oh, I went the right way. Right, there you go. So I'm just going to disconnect things for a minute. Oh, incidentally, it pulls about 170 milliamps from 5 volts when it's running. I have to say, it's feels quite warm. Yeah, if you look at, so the outside pins on the USB connector, so this one there and this one there, they are power. The 2 middle ones are data lines. And I'm just looking at the board actually to see whether it's multi-layer, because it's very thin. Yeah, there could be a middle copper layer in there. In fact, I'd probably think there is. But I can't see any connection to those data lines at all. So it's not a media player. I don't know what the USB port's for, and maybe it's for programming them in the factory. I don't know. I can't see any sort of UART, so to speak, of, you know, a CH340 or something to enable USB programming. So yeah, can't help you with the USB question. But anyway, still an interesting little device. Probably still not a lot of money. I don't know how much they are now. But yeah, mine came from AliExpress. They're probably all over eBay like a rash as well. These things generally are. So just for now, I'm going to solder on another connector. So I've got an audio output. And then box it up, I think. And we'll call this one done. Anyway, as usual, thank you very much for watching. Please click like, subscribe, do all that rubbish, and I'll see you very soon here on Doz's Television Workshop. Cheers now. Bye.